The 1100s was a tough time for many civilizations around the world. And one of the civilizations that fell itself, but was the cause of the fall of the Kingdom of Ghana, is that of the Almoravids. The Almoravids, who rushed into West Africa, took down the Kingdom of Ghana. This kingdom became very weak, and from inside this kingdom, several kingdoms would form, all disconnected. One of them that was once owned by the Kingdom of Ghana was Walata. Walata was rushed by the Almoravids, and the Almoravids completely took over this region. But as if nothing had happened before, the Almoravids evaporated and left the populations that were there previously. Although the Kingdom of Ghana became weak at this time due to this population of black people who lived in Walata, it did not fall. What does this mean? Well, it means that Gao became unique, Kumbisala became unique, and several other regions inside of the Kingdom of Ghana became unique. This left a power vacuum, a big one, and there were plenty of people who were ready to fill it. One of the populations that took advantage of this was the Susu. The Susu were a people who lived under the occupation of the Ghana for a very long time. Gradually, they gained power and became a powerful civilization all on their own, neglecting any rules and regulations from the Kingdom of Ghana as its power waned. There was also the short lived kingdom dynasty of Za, which was formed around Gao and was part of the Gao Empire that had once been owned by the Kingdom of Ghana, but since the Almoravids had been freed and independent, only to lose their independence in the 1200s. Another group that was growing at the time was the Mandinka. These people who would eventually take over this entire region were only small in this place and were connected mainly through heritage, meaning they belonged to the same tribe more than the same kingdom. But all this was about to change with the birth of Sunjata Keita. From the ashes of the Ghana Empire, the one that would get victory first was the Susu. The Susu became an enlarged civilization connected as an empire, while the Mandika remained very small. The Susu eventually colonized Kumbi Selah. Kumbi Selah at this point was the capital of the Kingdom of Ghana, and it fell to this king. This made it strategically the owners of the Ghana Empire. The story of Sunjata after this becomes very mythologized, and it has a lot of similarities with Shaka Zulu stories, a story of exile, prophecy, and so forth. We will not get deeply into this. All we know is that when it came down to it, Sunjata Keita was the elected and selected king by the other kings, that he should be the one to take on the king of Susu. And they bashed heads in a giant conflict. Representing the Susu was Sumanguru Kante, and representing the Mandinka was Sunjata Keita. The other fractured civilizations that were in the region joined up with one or the other to form bigger states, and they attacked as a unit. When the smoke cleared, the only kingdom left was the kingdom of the Mandinka, known as Mali Kingdom. And it was from this day on that they would enjoy centuries of rule. While Sundiata Keita was the founder of the Mali Kingdom, he is not necessarily the most important of these kings, as a lot of them played a very significant role in changing the size, the shape, the trade, reintroducing trade. Trade between North Africa and West Africa had waned due to wars with the Almoravids, redirecting the path routes from Sigilamasi, which was a very important path of trade. It would take at least 8 kings or 8 lines of kings until we get to Mansa Musa, the great king of Mali, who was depicted by almost everyone who existed at the time. This great king, of course, represents something completely on his own, which is the highest rise of the kingdom at the time. But even if the kingdom of Mali was this strong, what about the other kingdoms that were still located near it? What about Walata, that was completely independent of the Mali kingdom? Surely they didn't just give up their power to the people in that region. Conflicting oral history makes it difficult to know exactly how Walata was regained, but it's thought that Walata was regained directly by the successor of Sunjaita Keita. The other kingdoms that still existed was Gao. Wali Keita, the son of Sundiata Keita, is said in some oral history to have taken over Gao and Timbuktu. But this doesn't make any sense, as we have writings later on from Islamic scholars that depict Gao and Timbuktu being taken over by a different king. The eighth king, according to oral tradition, is Mansa Sakura. Now, there could have been more kings which were not written down, but we at least know that Mansa Sakura absolutely existed because we have, firstly, many evidences, but also we have Ibn Khaldun who writes about him in great detail. According to Ibn Khaldun, Mansa Sakura is responsible for taming Timbuktu and taming Gao, or the Gao Gao, as he calls them, and also Takrur. In this passage that I pulled up, Ibn Khaldun gives us a full understanding of what the religion must have been like. A lot of people don't understand that Sundiata Keita was very familiar with Islam, and even though his religion might have been mixed with African mythology, he surely practiced Islam to some degree. So we read this. The same also applies to their religion's conditions. They are ignorant of prophecy and do not have religious law except for the small minority that lives near the temperate regions. For instance, the Abyssinians, who are neighbors of the Yemenites and have been Christians from pre Islamic and Islamic times down to the present, and the Mali, the Gaugao, and the Takru, who live close to the Maghreb and at this time are Muslims. They are said to have adopted Islam in the 13th century. We also know that, of course, the Ghana Empire had Muslims, and Muslims, almost after they were created, they started having groups that adopted the religion. As you remember, there was that guy from Spain who came down to these regions and talked about how some of the people practice Islam while others practiced their traditional religion. Easily one of the most fascinating kings of the Mali Empire is Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr, written down in this name, there's other names given as well in other lists, but in this name is given by the Muslims Ibn Khaldun and Al Umari, and they both say that Abu Bakr traveled as far as he can to the through the oceans. This is the story that brings up the whole did Africans make contact with America earlier than Columbus? This kingdom that is making a huge impact in the world and being documented by several Islamic scholars reached its one of its greatest peaks when Mansa Musa came into power. Mansa Musa, who had by his time reestablished big connections with the North Africans and everybody else, was in a great position. Now, there's obviously stories about him carrying lots of gold and going to Mecca and Medina through Egypt. And of course, there's Al Umari who writes about him and his journey there. And this is what he wrote. From the beginning of my coming to stay in Egypt, I heard talk of the arrival of this Sultan Musa on his pilgrimage and found the Cairnes eager to recount what they had seen of the Africans' prodigal spending. I asked the Emir Abu, and he told me of the opulence, manly virtues, and the piety of his Sultan. When I went out to meet him, that is, on the behalf of the mighty Sultan Al Malik Al Nasir, he did me extreme honor and treated me with the greatest courtesy. He addressed me, however, only through the interpreter, despite his perfect ability to speak the Arabic tongue. Then he forwarded to the royal treasury many loads of unworked native gold and other valuables. I tried to persuade him to go up to the citadel to meet the Sultan, but he refused persistently, saying, I came for the pilgrimage and nothing else. I do not wish to mix anything else with my pilgrimage. He had begun to use this argument, but I realized that the audience was repugnant to him because he would be obliged to kiss the ground and the Sultan's hand. I continued to cajole him, and he continued to make excuses, but the Sultan's protocol demanded that I should bring him into the royal presence, so I kept on at him till he agreed. When he came in the Sultan's presence, we said to him, kiss the ground, but he refused, outright saying, how may this be? Then an intelligent man was with him whispered to him something we could not understand, and he said, I make obeisance to God who created me. Then he prostrated himself and went forward to the Sultan. The Sultan half rose to greet him and sat him by his side. They conversed together for a long time. Then Sultan Musa went out. The Sultan sent to him several complete suits of honor for himself, his courtiers, and all those who had come with him, and saddled and bridled horses for himself and his chief courtiers. This man flooded Cairo with his benefactions. He left no court, emir, nor holder of a royal office without the gift of a load of gold. The Cairenes made incalculable profits out of him and his suit in buying and selling and giving and taking. They exchanged gold until they depressed its value in Egypt and caused its price to fall. Now, as fascinating as that is, one of the things that he did was create and I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing this, Jingar Grand Mosque, which is credited to Mansa Musa, which is a really large mosque inside of Mali. The next great ruler would be Mansa Suleiman, after the son of Mansa Musa. This Mansa Suleiman is contemporary with Ibn Battuta. And so everything that Ibn Battuta writes about the kingdom of Mali is happening at the time of Suleiman. During the time of Ibn Battuta, we can see that Walata is under the power of the Mali Empire, but it's not fully, as he on several occasions mentions it different than when he says Mali. He will say things like, I traveled from Walata to to the region known as Mali. But this is what he says about Walata. We reached the city of Iwalatan at the beginning of the month of Rabi 1 after a journey of 2 full months from Sigilimasa. It is the first district of the country of the blacks. The Sultan's deputy there was Farba Hussein. Farba means deputy. When we arrived, the merchants deposited their gold goods in a open space, and the blacks took responsibility for them. The merchants went to the Farba, who was sitting on a rug under a shelter. His officials were in front of him with spears and bows in their hands. Now, my only point of reading this is to show you that at least by this time, the communication between Sigilamasa in Morocco and the Kingdom of Mali was generally positive, with these people moving up and down constantly. In fact, there's a part where he talks about how there is a business in that area by black merchants who all they do is sell water in the desert, which that is a great business. Anyway, that is a general summary of some of the most important people in the Mali Empire. The Mali Empire did continue for a while after that, but there are several other empires that would spring up from that point on, and that is for another video.